Thank you. I'm going to start with a confession. I do not work on tax. Sorry. However, I work for Transparency International, the global anti-corruption organisation. So I guess I'm here in some ways to give you some extra ammunition about... is this going automatically? Is it on timer? Do I have to touch something?
Sorry, that was me putting it up. And you can
do I also control? I want to be in control if possible. Great. That's great, thank you. So, okay, well, let's crack on. So, so Transparency International, global anti-corruption organisation. I'm going to give you some ammunition just in case your arguments about tackling tax evasion or avoidance aren't working. You can also start using the corruption angle. The 2017 Russian laundromat scandal that came out last year found out that between 20 and 80 billion US dollars was flowing out of Russia through 21 shell companies, most of which were based in the UK, and landed up in 96 countries around the world, being spent on fur, public school education for children, and a whole range of luxury items. The largest corruption scandal across Latin America that has been rumbling on now for the last few years saw Brazilian engineering company Odebrecht get a $2.6 billion fine just recently. Pick any major corruption scandal. These ones are a little bit old. And you will find at the centre of those a number of shell companies. You'll find a secret company was used to either pay the bribe, to shift and hide stolen money, or to purchase luxury property that we see in so many parts of London. And kind of this corruption, in the same way that tax evasion and tax avoidance, depends on secrecy. So if you are a corrupt individual, you need to be able to hide your identity to distance yourself away from the funds that you have stolen. And so you can do that by using corporate vehicles, trusts, foundations, other companies to disguise your connection. You can hire some nominees to sign the papers so that your name doesn't go on any documentation. You can set it up in a place that doesn't even require you to tell them that you're in control. And then you can layer it up in different jurisdictions, further muddying the trail so that it's going to take a long time before law enforcement will find out who you are, if they ever do. And so this corrupt person at the centre of it, who's actually controlling and owning these funds, is called the beneficial owner that we've been hearing earlier. And beneficial ownership secrecy is one of the biggest, I guess, challenges of the day. And this secrecy is why, to date, the global detection rate of illicit money, so we're talking about corruption, tax evasion, and money laundering, is as low as 1%. So these corruption scandals have a few things in common. The opportunity to be corrupt, if you are a big FIFA official with a slush fund, or a government minister with access to public funds. The ability to hide behind those kind of corporate vehicles. And somebody willing to take your money. So that could be the banks, or it could be the middlemen. Or it could be the real estate agents at the end of the chain who want to take your cash because they kind of almost have a conflict of interest in doing proper due diligence because they want to sell a mansion as well. I just want to focus quickly on this ability to hide. This is a screen grab from a website offering anonymity packages. Setting up a shell company is not illegal. This is completely legal, I must say that for any lawyers in the room. But it could mask illegal activity flowing through it. So this particular package sets out what it will sell you. It says, for those jurisdictions where there are publicly available, accessible records, only the names of our nominees will be displayed. So that means you can buy yourself some nominees when you set this company up. You can also buy an ink stamp, an address, you can buy yourself some bank accounts. If you want to spend a little bit more money, you can buy yourself a shelf company. So it was incorporated a few years ago, and that adds a little bit more legitimacy to your activity because it looks like you've been around for longer. And then those people in the middle, the middlemen that are kind of facilitating this flow, there is a sliding scale, and I think this is really important. You do have enablers, professional enablers, who are complicit. And then you've got some that are just negligent, grossly negligent, and then careless. And then you've actually got a bunch of lawyers and accountants, real estate agents, believe it or not, who are actually trying to do the right thing. They are actively trying to find out who is in control of their clients, these companies that they're working with. And try as they might, they cannot find the origin of the client. And in most cases, they're allowed to proceed with the transaction anyway. We're obviously, as many of you know, and many of the people in this room, advocating for that beneficial ownership information to be an added data point included on an existing company register and made publicly accessible, just to increase the risks on those who might want to scam the system or who might try to be corrupt. So, beneficial ownership. It's a technical issue, and it's not new. We hear it a little bit more in the news. It kind of amuses me, the fact that we talk about it now as though it's this big thing, but it is extremely technical, and it's not sexy. Not that sexy anyway. But because it is in the news, and that's largely to do with things like thinking about the Panama Papers that has shone a light and has made people start talking about these issues, it's been matched by a bit of a policy shift, I guess. And I'm just going to look at the last 5 years. So the Financial Action Task Force is the global standard, they set the rules for money laundering around the world. They've had these standards in place. Most countries say that they abide by them, although implementation is very weak. But back in 2013, the G8 put out these principles to prevent the misuse of companies and legal arrangements. In just 1 year later, we managed to scale up from G8 countries to the full G20 countries, who also realised that this was a major issue. And then came the fourth EU anti-money laundering directive 1 year later in 2015 that actually concretised some of these kind of highfalutin principles into actual legislation that would require EU countries to have this register in place that would be accessible to those with a legitimate interest. I don't have it in there, but obviously that has now changed and those registers will have to be made public in the future. And then finally, the Anti-Corruption Summit in London in 2016. This was an interesting moment. It didn't come out where it came out with a big declaration, a big statement. But the really crucial thing about this was it moves away from this G8, G20 elite set of countries. And 36 countries made a total of 110 commitments on beneficial ownership transparency. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Panama Papers leaks was 2 months prior to that. Significantly, there was a new set of countries. Afghanistan, Kenya, Nigeria, Afghanistan, all those countries said, we're going to go public. We're going to actually jump ahead of some of the G20 countries and establish this public register. And we've just heard, obviously, the more recent announcement that the UK will require the overseas territories to do likewise. Huge win. So there has been this kind of big momentum on the issue. And aside from the incredible campaigning from people in this room and from NGOs, campaigners, activists, we've also, a major influencer, I guess, has also been from the private sector, who have come round to the idea, and it's taken a little while, they've come around to the idea that it is good to know who they are working with, who they are investing in, who is in their supply chains, and who they might establish a joint venture with. It's about lowering their risk at the end of the day because they don't want to get those big fines that I was thinking about slapped onto them. And I think a shout out to the B team, I don't think they're in the room, they've really helped galvanise those companies around the issue of beneficial ownership transparency and are now working on this issue of fair tax issues too, so it's good that they're getting behind this issue. We've had a whole host of kind of business leaders signal their support from major multinational firms like BHP Billiton, actually saying, we're happy with that legislation being imposed upon us. Go for it, do it. That kind of energy is really, really important to make it not look like it's a bunch of angry NGO people, I guess, which is easy to do. So there is all this kind of momentum behind this issue of beneficial ownership transparency. There's a billion challenges out there. As Ewan has already mentioned, will they actually work in the end? Will they, how do we verify the data? And I'd love to have a conversation about that. Is that you? This is moving around. Okay, so I want to come back to this idea of actually implementing some of the commitments that these governments have made in these big public forums. So back in 2015, Transparency International did a big analysis of all the G20 countries to see how well they were actually doing in implementing their own beneficial ownership principles, which are not even as strong as we would like them to be. And we found back then that 15 G20 countries had weak or average frameworks, and in some ways that's generous when you look into the fuller assessment. So we reran this study and published the results just a little while ago, and please do pick up a copy of this because I don't want to carry them all back. You'll find all the details in there. And our top level finding was that G20 countries are starting to make some progress, but progress is really, really slow. So take a look at that, and then this is the 2017 results. I obviously can't put a PowerPoint presentation together. Okay, 2015, 2017. So we have seen quite a bit of progress, especially from France, Germany, Italy, and Brazil. Brazil, who moves up 2 categories. But progress is slow. We still have 11 countries in the middle. We had 15 before, we've still got 11. And Canada and South Korea have not moved at all. Canada as a G7 host as well this year, hosting the summit this week, and criticising North Korea for using shell companies. It's just, this kind of hypocrisy can sometimes grate. And there's also a number of other major challenges that still exist in this area. So the majority of countries, the analysis in here is really deep and detailed, and the kind of overall framework is a bit of a blunt instrument. This is where you want to go to look at how countries are doing on very specific issues, so I really encourage you to look at this. The majority of countries still do not know who owns and controls companies in their own territories. That's the third column. It's largely orange and red. Second, access to beneficial ownership information, if it is even collected, is extremely limited, making it really hard to conduct corruption and money laundering investigations. And the third, gatekeepers such as the banks, the lawyers, accountants, real estate agents, they're real money laundering and corruption weak spots still. So I guess, really wrapping up, I think one of our points in this area is is the G20, this group of leading economies that we all aspire to be, are they actually still leaders? Or are they being displaced by other groups that are trying to take on this mantle and move faster? So yes, it's been in the news a lot. Yes, there is a lot of momentum. Yes, I think we can all be incredibly proud of what we've done. But a lot of countries are still saying, look, we're doing all we can. We have these principles. We abide by FATF. But it's a lie. There is still so much work to be done. And so much misconceptions, I guess, around how fast and how quickly these countries are actually acting. These are their own principles that they said they would adopt themselves. Moving on 3-4 years later, there is still so much work to be done. So if this can help with the tax justice arguments, if you want to be pushing a fair tax arguments and you find that actually maybe they'll be more reactive to a corruption argument, please feel free to use them. Thank you.